So thanks again for making the trip. We're really grateful to have you, really excited that you've all been admitted to the program. I'm here speaking on behalf of the faculty today. You'll meet some of them at around 10 o'clock, but today is a teaching day for most of them. You'll get the chance to meet the ones that can squeeze in an hour in between their classes, but we are a very active campus with a lot of things going on, especially in the spring. So today, we have a lot of things planned. We have Jam of the Day. We're going to be looking at about a 12-ish hour day. Always my favorite part of it. Coming from studio cultures, this is normal for me, but at the very least, there's a lot of stuff that we're going to do today. So I have maybe about 90 minutes planned to talk. I may get through it really fast. If you've watched my talk online that we've published, there will be some overlap from that. So if you know what I'm going to say and you have questions, feel free. I like to interact. I'm not beholden or really scripted to anything. Then at 10 o'clock, we have 5 faculty members from the DUB group coming by, 2 from the Division of Design, 2 from Computer Science, and who's our 5th person? Andy Coe from the Information School, our former chair. They'll come by. They're going to talk a little bit about their research and their teaching, be available to answer your questions. And then at 11 o'clock, in lieu of sitting in on a class, because that isn't actually how learning goes, or like as a good example of what the learning experience is like here, we're going to do an extensive charrette. Anybody familiar with that term? You've heard the term charrette before? So charrette basically is like a like Aggie did it last year. I found a picture of it. You'll see it here in a second. So we'll talk about that, but we'll do that for the bulk of the kind of the mid-afternoon. So we'll run through a number of design exercises, and then the program staff will leave the room. We'll go take a coffee break for an hour, and then you'll get a chance to talk with the current cohort. So some students will be coming by. They're ready and prepared to answer your questions about their experience in the program and what they think about it. So you get a chance to hear from them directly without any filters from us. And then right before we leave, Matt's going to do a quick conversation about career outcomes. So what happens typically with our students towards the end of their education and then as they transition into industry. And then finally, at 5 o'clock, we'll take a walk across campus. We'll do a quick tour of campus, but that will end us at the light rail station on the south end of campus, right near Husky Stadium. We'll take the train 1 stop and then walk across the Capitol Hill district towards the Design Studio Substantial, where they're hosting a reception for us tonight. There's no programming during the reception, so it's just a final opportunity to socialize, get to know people, current students, past students, and some faculty members. So those are all the things that are going on today. It's, again, pretty packed day. After about 8 o'clock, we'll have light snacks during the happy hour, but then you'll be in Capitol Hill, so if you'd like to go find a place to get dinner, it is the place to go get dinner. It is the kind of the heart of cuisine in Seattle, and I can make some recommendations if you're interested. Okay. So what to expect from today? And so, we've been doing Visitors Day now. Mary, have we done one since cohort 2?
Cohort 1.
Even cohort 1. So yeah, this will be our 6th Visitors Day since the inception of the program. Normally what it does is it's an opportunity for you all to get to know each other. You've all been offered admission to the program. The faculty committee has reviewed your applications. You won out in a very competitive process. Very competitive. Our acceptance rate this year is less than 15% or so. So very competitive. The fact that you've been offered admission distinguishes you very strongly from a lot of other people in the world. So now is your opportunity to get to know each other and kind of figure out, why were you admitted? But also we get an opportunity to talk more about the program. We've prepared a lot of things and we hope that we've answered a lot of your questions online, but now is your chance to ask any clarifying questions, to learn a little bit more about what it's like to be in the program, to see our space, answer a lot of questions that come from there, and your opportunity to meet the faculty. So this is hopefully knowing that our decision deadline is next Monday. You get enough information here to feel clear and ready to either accept or decline our offer and make a commitment to move to Seattle, which is my hope. If all of you showed up again here next year or later in September, I could not be more happy. So The conversation that we're going to have today, or at the very least this talk, if you've watched the one online, it has a similar structure, but I really want to go through and answer a bunch of these questions. And this is kind of the structure. So we're going to talk a little bit about what the program is, and then I'm hopefully going to mount a case for why we do it this way, so that it's apparent to you. We're going to experience the where of things. So I'm going to make a case for why Seattle, and why Seattle is the best place to do your graduate education. Then we'll transition to the charrette. We'll talk about how. This is a little bit about how we learn or how we teach. And then finally, to what end. So when we get down to the career conversation and to the conversation with the students, you'll hopefully emerge with a clear picture about how this graduate program fits into your career objectives, your personal and life objectives, and how it will enrich your lives in the future. This is my goal. Okay, so the two things I'll add some clarification on. So the charrette today, we're going to do a focused design activity. We have a whole bunch of things prepped up. They are fairly straightforward. Last year, this group, this is Sarah, Will, and Alex, all three from the current cohort on Visitors Day last year. We worked on a program, 4-hour charrette last year, to find ways to ameliorate the problem, or at least better elevate how evaluating the truthfulness of news. We're going to do something a little lighter this year. It was just very close after the election, you know? So I was especially feeling it. I was like, whoa, what has technology done? So yeah, this year, hopefully we'll get something a little more lighter. And this is Aggie's suggestion. So Aggie's our social media person. We're working on a prompt that she suggested to me, which I'm pretty excited about. And then after that's all done, we're going to go to Substantial. This is a picture of their studio. They're a cornerstone of design and development in Seattle. They do a lot of great work and have been around for many years. It's exciting. Davey, who's their director of user experience, is a Capstone sponsor this year and has been a supporter of the program since I've taken over at the very least. So it's really nice that they're giving back to us, and we're going to go up there and have a good time. There'll be music and conversation, and it'll be really fun, but we'll have to actually make that transit. Okay. So before I dive into my talk, we should probably get to know each other. Let's talk next about curriculum. All right, so what is the program? You've all been accepted to the program, but maybe some of you are wondering just what on earth are we going to be doing? In the coming year, we have not proposed any changes to the curriculum. So what last year's cohort is currently engaged in, any of you that decide you want to come to the program will also be engaged in it. But one of the questions that came up in the RSVPs was like, what do you not offer that a 2-year program does offer? And I think the answer to that is not very much. So our minimum requirement is 46 credits. Then most students typically take, I think, probably around 48 to 50. So it's actually fairly packed full. So you consider a typical graduate program is around 60 credits, 10 credits a quarter, 6 quarters. Then that is like how packed full of everything it is. So the way we structure this is we have a lecture series, which is 3 core classes covering the kind of historical and theoretical underpinnings of the practice. The next piece is 5 studio courses. The 5 studios are really intense, focused practice, where you're taking your understanding of the theoretical underpinnings of the work and applying that directly to project-based operations. We can see an awful lot, so our fall quarter last year was, we looked at changing human behaviors in the context of smart cities. So how could we change human behavior at scale? And so with a cohort of roughly 30 people, we'll have 10 teams working on 10 different problems, collaborating and working together to draw and bring up better expertise and understanding of each of the techniques that we practice, especially in close collaboration with faculty members. Then we also have a capstone project, which starts earnestly in January. So you're here for 1 quarter. And then in January, we start the team formation and problem identification phase through very short class, just 4 hours a week. Then we transition in the spring quarter towards a full program of formative user research. So 10 weeks of usually qualitative research paired with additional design research methods in order to better understand a potential user base and in order to more accurately set a problem worth tackling in the summer studio. And in the summer, you take 8 credits of studio, which roughly works out to be about 40 hours a week. You're basically working full time on that project through a weekly sprint of iteration, prototyping, testing, and then finally deliverable production. It ends with the program ends with a broad portfolio review. So we normally do this as an industry. We're trying it this year as an industry-focused event. So so the portfolio event in this August will be at the Seattle Public Library. Will be aimed at bringing in as many people as possible to see the output of the studio after around 20 weeks of hard work on one particular project. All of the classwork that you see here is structured around team collaboration. And so a huge part of what we do is not only trying to help you individually develop skills and competencies, but also about learning how to work together and to better assess and understand how problem solving is improved through collaboration. So all of our studio projects are team-based. We try to build teams based on the best assemblages of skills, attitudes, and availability. So an awful lot of what you're doing is going to be all about like learning how to work together in different configurations towards different ends. The work that we do in any of these studios could not be accomplished individually. And as a result, that's why we see the shape of the portfolios are the way they are. It's because when we build teams and put them in places, and a team is something that works together versus a group, right? A group is 3 people or 4 people or 5 people working kind of individually and then eventually synthesizing all their individual work. We work in teams, which is 3 people together working on the same problem, basically full time, right? Undivided attention. One of the things that's nice about studio practice at the very least is that it gives you that level of focus. And I'll talk about that more in a little bit. And then finally, on top of the Capstone project, we also do a weekly seminar. And that seminar is hosted by the broader DUB community. So DUB is our parent organization. It is a broad-reaching research group on campus made up of HCI practitioners. And what they do, all of the practitioners and researchers. So what they do is they bring in speakers every week. We learn and listen about the full range of what's happening in the kind of cutting edge of HCI research. And then we go through an exercise of taking those ideas, engaging in research translation on them, and trying to take those ideas and turn them into design ideas. So we spend a lot of time focusing on like, how do we translate cutting edge research into actual like product or service ideas. So that's the DUB seminar piece. It works out to be, it looks a little like this. This is 1 credit. So you can see we start the kickoff with Immersion Studio. So 1 week before classes start, we come in and we do, I'll give you a design brief on Monday, and we have a presentation on Friday. So we do the sprint methodology, at least if you're familiar with that from the Google process. I have my own flavor of it as well, but you'll get a brief on Monday, and then we'll walk through a lot of structured activities, mostly to introduce you to what it's like working in the studio, to giving and getting critique, to getting to know each other a little better, and being here all at once. So that's the first thing that we kick off. Then you get a few days off. And then the next Wednesday, we come back and we start with the ideation studio. Again, we're continuing the theme of changing human behaviors. Working to get an industry sponsor right now, so hopefully we'll be working with someone from industry who's going to give us a prompt for this class and help provide feedback and iteration throughout the project. But I haven't finalized that yet, so I'm not going to commit to it. I have some good ideas. But it'll likely be either in the realm of healthcare or artificial intelligence. So those are probably going to be either one of those 2 project areas. That studio is mostly focused on developing a robust set of design methodological practices. So each studio encompasses the full range of the research, ideation, synthesis, prototyping, and testing across any given project. So you'll run through that entire cycle in each of the studios, but each studio will focus on different modes or manners or methods of doing that kind of work. So for instance, in Ideation Studio, we look at doing research through design as a practice. We do secondary research to inform your particular problem definition. We do sketching and storyboarding as ways of exploring design ideas. We then do web and mobile prototyping in order to better think out through a design process. And then finally, the production side, we focus on creating design specs. So like, what is a concrete deliverable that helps you communicate design ideas? That's Ideation Studio as a whole. We then shift into, and then that's paired with a usability and user research course. And so usability and user research is about developing a concrete understanding of the theory of why we do user research and what different methods are best understood and utilized in HCI practice. And so we'll see things about understanding analysis and synthesis as modes of understanding users, right? As ways of uncovering their needs and behaviors. Task analysis is common. We talk about how to do usability, right? How to actually concrete, learn from design prototypes. And then even going down to base levels like what is research and why, and how do we formulate meaningful research questions in the design, they're suitable for the design process. And then coupled with that, in addition to the Dev seminar, is your choice of elective. We have a lot of electives. Every one of our 4-member departments offers different kinds of electives throughout the year. It's common that, for instance, in the School of Art, in the Division of Design, where my faculty position is, you could take my Design Research Studio, which is a fairly intense opportunity just to do problem formulation and concepting. But you can also take Axel Osler's Introduction to Interaction Design, which addresses a lot of the conceptual ideas around interaction design. But also there's classes like, if you're looking to brush up on your visual design skills, there is a visual communications class offered through Human-Centered Design and Engineering. If you're interested in information visualization, we have that offered in at least 2 departments, typically in HCDE and in the computer science department, or excuse me, the Allen School. You gotta remember, they had a name change recently. So the Paul D. Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering. If you want to approach information visualization from a more technical point of view, which is something that Jeff here, when he's here a little later, will talk about. That's the work that he does in his lab. And then there's also opportunities if you want to learn more about like HCI programming, physical computing, or video prototyping. At the basic level, HCD offers short 2-credit courses that are very strongly craft focused. So if you'd like to build up a craft area skill, we can expect to see that next year as well. So that's the kind of electives that we get. That's just just scratching the surface. As we get later in the year, we also have usability studies is strongly offered in the winter. So if you'd like to spend time really learning the nitty-gritty of usability studies, HCD offers that in the winter. And then in the spring quarter elective is like one of the popular ones is Jake Wabrock's Designing Information Experiences, which is an experience design class taught from a phenomenological perspective. So if you're interested in philosophy, he does a lot of foundational work in explaining the intersection of design and philosophy in that class. Super cool. It's the class I wish I could take if I had time someday. Maybe I'll just try to co-teach it with him. Anyway, so there's lots of electives. We have a super robust portal that goes through all of our elective offerings every quarter. In addition to capturing some of them ones, we have videos from current instructors explaining the class that we do. We have notes from previous cohort members, previous MHCID students about how they felt about electives. So we do a lot of work to help you make the right choice in picking electives that fill in gaps that you may have in your own skill, or to help you deepen a specialization, which is really kind of like how they work out. So if you're a user researcher and you've been working in user research and you want to deepen that even more, like really understand the theoretical underpinnings, there's lots of ways of deepening specialization. But if you're a visual designer looking for technology skills, you can also kind of develop that as well. Kind of comes from all over. So then once we move into the winter quarter, our core classes are the lecture in user interface software and technology. So it'll be taught by Andy Ko, who you'll meet at around 10 o'clock. Andy Ko is a professor in the information school and the director of the informatics undergraduate program. But this class was new this year, and Andy, being the person that he is, wrote a book about this topic just for our students. And it covers the foundational elements of just kind of like how do interfaces work? And so there is not a ton of like coding in this class, but there is a deep technology expertise. That is paired with a prototyping studio. And that prototyping studio is all about blending the physical and the digital. So we take a lot of the design methods that we know and understand that we build up in Ideation Studio and begin to apply those to a number of different physical forms. So what we see is we explore different design ideas through different prototyping methods. Paper prototypes, video prototypes, form and modeling, so actually hands-on like shaping objects in order to better understand the research through design process and kind of coming to grips with like why are things shaped the way they are, and then getting into fabrication and then physical computing. So we do units on Arduino and in enclosures and housings. And so that work is all about also exploring and understanding how to get design feedback. So we learn really commonly like make a thing, learn from people, revise the thing, learn from people. So we like focus on design iteration as a soft skill that we build up. And then that also is paired with Capstone Planning, which Capstone Planning class is a 1-credit seminar that includes some secondary research for your capstone project, basically exploring what possible design ideas might be out there, as well as team formation. And so we run a few workshops. We help people align with other members of the cohort to ensure that we build a team that will carry them through the rest of the year. Okay, before I move on to the back half of the year, any questions about fall and winter? Not generally. So the actual way that works out is that the departments give us seats in their electives. And there is some that are small and reserved, like some of the Visual Studio design classes are fairly restrictive. You have to be able to like show your portfolio to the instructor in order to get approval to take the class. But some of them are more open-ended, where we have more expansive opportunities for people. Normally, any of the classes that are in our 4-member departments, they could be available to you. And they will apply to your degree provided they're of a certain level or above. Usually it's 400 level and above are permitted. Some 300 level classes are also okay. But otherwise, if you would like to take electives outside of our 4-member departments, we would have to have a conversation, you and myself and Matt, and then we'd look over the syllabus and decide if it is aligned with our learning objectives in order to, and see if it makes you like a more robust practitioner. But generally, if there's things like there's classes in like communications and anthropology that I think have like strong alignment with what a good HCI practitioner could do, but it's about finding those classes. They don't offer us seats, and sometimes it's about showing up on the first day and saying like, I want to join. Any other questions? All right, lots of them. Let's go over here.
Do people usually take like a bunch of electives up front, or like kind of spread them out throughout the year?
I think it's different from year to year. So in cohort 4, most people pack them in fall and winter, just because there's spring. It's really nice out, and maybe you don't want to spend every day in the summer in the studio. I guess it's not really nice, but it can be. And then. And usually in the summer, there's not enough time to do it. There's enough going on with Capstone. There's not really an opportunity. But this year, I feel like we're seeing things spread out. So I think quite a big portion of the cohort this year took electives fall, winter, and spring. And so it varies as to what your commitment is. Also, like I think it's best to come into it with a kind of a thought or a plan to say, I'm going to take an elective in every quarter. And then be prepared to like bail out of your spring quarter one, depending on how you're feeling. It's a really intense program, and there's a lot going on and a lot to do. And if you are, and there's lots of opportunities in the spring here. So consider the like networking, hackathons, all the other things that may go on that you want to have time for. you have to balance the value of that versus versus deepening specialization, for instance. Okay, your question.
What sorts of more technical electives are offered through the Allen School, so things like programming, useful interfaces?
So their HCI practice is growing. I think it's on campus. They have really a design methods class that they offer to us. Then we have information visualization. But the other class, I think they also are offering an advanced HCI class, either in the fall or winter next year. That's going to be much more programming focused, but at the controller level. So I think that it's an awful lot about like getting down to like, well, what happens like with events and pointers, for instance. And so like to that degree, like if there is a conceptual idea of this, then there is a detailed one that is very strongly about the developing interfaces from the kind of conceptual basis, like the more closer to the hardware, I suppose is the better way to approach it. But it is, as far as other classes go, it really depends on what sort of skills you're looking to build. And if you're looking for like front-end development, there's probably better classes in the information school than computer science. The computer science department is very theoretical computer science. So if that's an area you want to build, I would look towards the other departments like HCI programming that MHCID will offer, and some of the web development courses that they offer in the iSchool.
You mentioned that the departments set aside some seats for the electives.
Mm-hmm.
Is it ever hard to get into them? Like more people want to?
Sometimes. There is competition. Matt, well, I would have to ask Matt because I think he manages a lot of this process. Most people get their first choice of electives every quarter.
Yeah, far and away most people do, but winter and fall quarter, there were definitely a couple of courses that were oversubscribed with first choices. So the spring quarter, I think everybody got their first choice this spring quarter.
Yeah.
A lot of choices, fewer students taking them.
It's especially common for certain upper level courses in design and HCDE. So for instance, the quantitative or experiment design class, we rarely get seats in, mostly because the prerequisites are, you have to have a strong stat background and get into that sort of class. Whereas like division of design courses, their studios are very tightly scoped to be small size. So if, for instance, you want to take information design, which Karen will talk about at around 10 o'clock, that class usually only gives us 2 seats, and she usually only accepts 2 people because she doesn't want her studio to grow to 30 or 40 people. It's harder to manage a studio at that size. So there is some, but I think in the fall and winter, I would say about 75% of people get their first choice, and I think it really depends on your colleagues in the cohort as well, like where their emphasis and desires are.
So when you guys like choose if we can get in those courses or not, is it like merit-based this decision or is it like lottery?
How the decision is made, it's often based on a conversation that I might have with you, for instance. So like Matt and I will collaborate, but it's done based on our understanding and maybe a conversation about trying to reach your goals. It's not just kind of like send in an application and pray, where it's not a very big group. There's only 4 of us, and there's only 30 of you. So we can evaluate and work out problems pretty quickly, or help better understand like where your objectives are and make sure that we can align class placement to your desires. And sometimes it's about like, well, maybe not this quarter, but we'll offer it next quarter, or something along those lines. Tyler.
When is class registration for the fall?
When is class registration for the fall?
It's going to be later in the summer this year.
Yeah.
Summertime. You'll be one of the first things you'll get to do is to learn about electives, and we'll be setting that all up online.
Yeah.
Over the summer we'll do registration.
Okay. So then after winter, we transition into the spring course and the spring courses. We have design challenges and responses, which is our research studio. That is a design research oriented course. It's about developing, designing, and implementing a program of user research targeted towards 12 to 15 participants, and about developing research guides, documentation, and concepts to support your capstone project. So I think Aggie's not in the room anymore. She just started her project, and she's actually going through the institutional review board. She's working on a project around technology interventions around menopause, for instance. And she's working with a local design studio called Smashing Ideas to kind of help get that out in the world. But we also have teams working with NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. We have teams working with, we have a team working with the Seattle Times about the future of news engagement. We have a team working on like research translation for designers. So how can we create a framework enabling designers in practice to utilize the huge body of academic HCI research in a more purposeful way? So there's a huge breadth of projects that is going on, and there's a lot of opportunities. In the winter during capstone planning, during the team formation phase, you'll also be aligned with an industry mentor or sponsor. Sometimes industry partner will come to us with a problem and say, like, we'd love to have students try to work against this problem. And we collaborate with the industry partner to ensure that it meets our learning objectives, but also is an interesting project for y'all to work on. Or sometimes, but many of the cases is you define a project for yourself. My feeling is that when you go into industry, you'll have lots of opportunity to work on projects that other people tell you to do. So why not use this opportunity right now to figure out something for yourself? It also helps you develop a better understanding of where the edges of design can be, and also will help you learn to tell people when they are working on problems that aren't worthy of design effort. This is actually fairly common. In my industry experience was a lot like, we need a thing, and I'm like, you don't really need that thing. How about this other thing instead? And that's an awful lot of this. The purpose of this class is to develop that base level understanding of what constitutes a good design challenge, and what constitutes a good response to that challenge. That has been paired with Designing Interactive Systems, which is a in-depth theory course that basically builds up our understanding of what is human-centered design and then tears it all down back to its individual components. So it goes through all of the major intellectual movements in design and the design of interactive systems, and traces the lineage all the way back to the kind of the foundational elements of modernism and the Bauhaus. So that class is all about understanding where did design come from, why do we engage in the methods that we use, how did those methods inform the design of technology products, and the creation of socio-technical systems. So that class, again, heavily theory-based. It's run kind of like a seminar, and so it's an awful lot of developing that really strong intellectual understanding of why we do design, And then also you have still Dub seminar. You can take an elective in the spring. There's some good electives offered in the spring. But we also pair this with a class, a 1-credit course in portfolio and professional practices. So that's a short class where if you need help and attention in developing your portfolio, it allows you to take a lot of the work that you've done in your electives and previous studios, makes that into something that is a way to communicate your value to industry, and also helps you understand the way, like what it's like to do design in different kinds of organizations. We usually bring in industry folk for that. So this year we have the studio manager and creative director from Teague in Seattle teaching that, Clint Rule and Wyndon Hawkins. They're approaching it very much like helping you take your academic work and translate that into stories and artifacts that make sense for industry and hiring managers in particular. Okay. So once spring quarter's all done, you get a week off in June. It's usually really nice in June. And then you come back for the summer studio, which is 1 credit of Dub Seminar, 8 credits of Capstone Studio. So as we mentioned, Capstone Studio starts off with like finalizing your concept with your sponsor and instructor assistants. So like, what are you going to make? And then you go through 6 weeks of iterative prototyping and testing. Build a prototype, 1 week in low fidelity, test the prototype, revise the prototype into a higher fidelity prototype, test that prototype, revise that prototype into a higher fidelity prototype, and then test that one, derive a final like understanding of how that design concept works, and then sprint into 3 fast weeks of production, which is to say, develop a spec, a poster, a video, and a presentation in 3 weeks in order to prepare adequately for our Dub share out. So our opportunity is to share the outcome of your research and design with the Dub community throughout the University of Washington in a showcase. And then finally with our portfolio review and capstone presentations out to the broader industry and Seattle design community. So that's how it goes. What other questions do you have?
What is the job search look like? Is that kind of structured, or is that something you talk about?
So Matt will talk more about this in the afternoon, but the job search piece, usually the way it comes across is that usually starting in about January, February, we start doing brown bags to help you prepare for a lot of things. So when I ask her a lot of questions, it's formulated in a lot of ways. This search mostly is self-directed, but we do a lot of sidelong activities that will help you better prepare for your job search and career. So last year we did sessions on whiteboarding exercises. We do sessions on salary negotiation. We do sessions on like some of it is going to be covered in this professional practices class, but like how do you evaluate a manager, like, because that's a big part of your job, is like who's going to be growing your career, in your first few years. How do you pick the right company? How do you even figure out what companies are out there to like go after, right? There's like the big ones, and then there's like this huge broad swath of all these ones in the middle that really need expertise like you might have as a result of this. So a lot of it is done by your direction towards us, and then we help you out usually in weekly brown bag sessions for that. Yeah.
So, Michael,
Mm-hmm.
you just mentioned the sponsors. Are those like each of them like sponsor each of the team that here that we team up for like on each project, right?
Yep.
So for this project, are we like going to like do we choose about ourselves, or is it kind of assigned, or?
It's going to be a mix. So the reality is that we have companies that want to work with our students. The design studios in particular in Seattle are usually really excited to work with us. It helps them grow their practice, and it's exciting to get to know and meet people. But there's lots of companies around that want to work with us. That said, if we also have no restriction on bringing your own sponsor. So if you had a professional relationship or somebody you met at an event someplace, you wanted to bring them in, that can be done in both directions. So this year, most of the times, I did most of the legwork in finding sponsors last year. My intent is to have a good list, at least 10 to start with before we begin capstone planning, which is about the number of teams that we'll have. But that does not necessarily need to be exhaustive, excuse me. So it can be in both directions. The nice thing about finding your own sponsor is that it also gives you a lot of good practice in reaching out to people, talking about yourself and what you know and how you operate. Asking people for resources is an important leadership skill. And so the configuration of like finding your own sponsor can be a very rewarding process. So yeah. Yeah.
A lot of programs, a lot of two-year programs, give the students the opportunity to go to have internships, these kind of things, and that works better for them because when they graduate, they usually go to the same place that they work.
Yep.
So how does it work here? What's the rate of the graduate students? When do they get a job after graduation? Because this is so intense. I'm guessing they don't have time to do negotiations with these companies and things like that. So when do they get the job?
Yeah, Matt has good answers to these questions for our afternoon career session, but the bulk of our students find work before the end of the year. I think that's right, more than 75% before December.
More than 70% last year's class?
Yeah. So a lot of people, like when you begin your job search, the reality is that from my experience, a job hunt for designers can take anywhere between 0 and 3 months. So it really depends on what kind of skills you already brought to the table and how that lines into your education. But even for me, before I took this job, I had a few interviews here and there that led to offers. It was usually by the time the first interview happened before an offer was on the table, could be as long as 6 weeks. And it depends on the organization. So if you imagine that, kind of parallelizing that in some way, right? Starting here, like we had some people that had jobs that like they graduated and then they packed all their stuff on Saturday and then started their next job like Wednesday of the next week. So that does happen. But that was last year. We won't know about this year until we see what happens. But Matt will answer more of those questions in our career talk in the afternoon. It is very intense. There is no room for internships. A lot of students end up doing an internship in the fall if they can arrange it. So after graduation, you can start an internship and then use that as an opportunity. You can do that with CPT, for instance, if you're a international student. And then that may translate into a full-time job. It doesn't always. Okay, so as I mentioned before, right, like this entire model is set up from my point of view about pairing like theoretical understanding with hands-on like skill development. So we go into it being like, it's not like, this is what differentiates us from a boot camp. I think that's why you're applying to these sort of programs, is that it's not enough just to know how to make deliverables or to like put things on a page. Or like even like the arrangement of mobile apps, right? Like, yes, you can go ahead and develop like and make screens. Like I've seen that that's actually a skill that you can put together fairly quickly just by watching YouTube videos in a lot of cases. But that is not the point of this, right? It's about pairing the understanding of why we do stuff and how we do stuff. So and this is a part like my point of view is all about what I would like to see this program grow into. Is that we are a design leadership program. We will teach you to be excellent craftspeople, which I strongly believe is what this cohort could be, is exceptional craftspeople. But at the same time, what I would like for us to be able to do is to say, here is why design is important in industry in all sorts of different contexts, and to help you be able to articulate that value in such a way that it increases the importance of that within industry and helps grow teams and makes more relevant and beautiful things in the world. So that's my kind of aspirational point of view. And the way that we do this is by coupling that, like, why we do stuff. Like, you know, why is this method the right one? It's not enough to be able to just go like, well, we've always done this, or this has shown to be some sort of, that has value in some certain ways, right? It was only 15 years ago, maybe even less than that, we'll say 10 years ago, where the only way to do usability was informal lab studies. I haven't done a lab study and I can't remember how long, right? The way that design evaluation works these days is not through like one-way glass. It's through sit-along protocols, right? You're sitting down with a participant, you're using paper prototypes, you're only testing with a few people. And the reason why that has evolved from really formal lab studies and quantitative usability studies towards qualitative research and understanding of design problems is because the knowledge and expertise of practitioners has grown over the years. We have seen kind of like, we understand the goals of individual methods and we can translate those into new methods, new approaches, and that's where I want all y'all to be, right? That's what I want to see, is that when I go out 10 years from now and interview MHCID graduates, they're in director positions or SVP positions that are around design because they understand the role that design can play in an organization and how it can be used to move people, priorities, and like product in a lot of ways. So that's my goal. And so when we do all three of those things in this program, we create really well-rounded practitioners. That manifests in two big areas as I see it, right? There's a third area that's off of here, which is the soft skills category. That's actually one of the reasons why you should come to this program, is that will teach you how to collaborate and articulate your decision making, present your ideas in meaningful ways, like how to organize people and how to get things done. Those are the things that we do in this studio. But in addition to that, we also do, we focus on a lot of techniques. And so these are the sort of techniques that I see as people emerging from this program are very strong in. So that includes qualitative user research. Doing qualitative research is an integral part of all of our studios. Research translation, the idea of taking established research and gleaning insights from that established research into your own projects. Usability and design evaluation, both things very important, but especially knowing when to use each of these different pieces, right? Usability as a way of understanding what's working or how to make it work better, versus design evaluation, which is like which of these concepts is the right one and the most relevant. Rapid prototyping, of course, every week, all the time, making stuff. And then finally, interaction design, of course, like conceptually, not only in the nuts and bolts of things, but understanding how things fit together, what is the form of the objects and the behavior of the objects, and then especially design, storytelling, and rhetoric, and why we use one thing and the other thing, and then how do we flip between them. So, you know, stories is about building empathy with audiences. Rhetoric is about creating arguments. And so those are both things that we execute on through our studio and lecture process. But then in coupling with that, those are the kind of like the main techniques, like how do we approach this, but also like you get some core competencies. Like competencies are like, what are you going to be good at when you emerge from this? Interface design, absolutely. You will learn how to make interfaces of one form or another. And that can be like mobile apps, which we will do. It could be conversational UIs. It could be gestural UIs. It could be about human-machine cooperation. I mean, we have more and more people looking at that as a concept. So what do interfaces look like in the future when computers are making just as many decisions as users? We look at information architecture as a core component. It's one of the big gaps that I see in a lot of traditional design education is we don't talk about information architecture. So what is the content? Where does it come from? How is it stored? And how is it surfaced to people? You should be able to take a point of view about that. We talk about fabrication. So can you actually create models of things? If you're imagining a prototype that is actually physical that you're going to wire up with Arduino, is it enough to hand somebody the bundle of wires on the Arduino, or do you need to print a case for it so that they can use it in a way that simulates reality? So we actually get into, we'll go down to the maker space, we'll use the 3D printers, we'll use the laser cutters to burn plywood, and it's a fun experience. Videography as a storytelling technique, we do get into that. Evan sometimes helps us. But at the very least, the way that you can tell standalone stories through videos is really important when you are not there to defend your design ideas yourselves. Can you encapsulate that into something that is hyper relevant for a short period? And then collaborative decision making. The nature of our team program means that you'll learn to collaborate and to share your design ideas over time. And collaboration, like team-based environments, every person I talk to in industry, this is one of the most important things. It's not enough for designers to have a complete vision, that's important, but also know how to modify that vision, not only with stakeholders, but with other close collaborators. And so as a result, how can you get to the best result with the time and the resources that you have available? That's a lot of the stuff that we're gonna do. We do all of this in particular, the most important, the core of our program is studio life. Your studio is where everything happens, right? It is the space for work, it's the space for collaboration, it's the space for fun. We'll go in when we take a tour in there, but everything, all the work that we do, you have your own space. You have access to this building 24 hours. You have access to the studio at any time, right? It's your space. We, the instructors, come to your space for teaching, right? It's an interesting distinction. Like it's your place to work. Your things are here. We come in and we you know, there's some behaviors and things that we do as part of that, but it is a place that it's where things happen, right? You show work. We put things up on the board, right? There's an Instagram post that I think Aggie put up that has this picture, which is when in doubt, put everything on the board, which is absolutely true. It's about externalizing your work and externalizing your thoughts. It's about collaborating with people, sometimes on your team, but also with other people. Feedback is the core component, right? Studio is not a studio without critique. So that's a big portion of what we do, when we come to the studio and we do work, like of a 5-hour block that we do for studio time, myself and co-instructor will probably talk for an hour of that time. But the other 4 hours of that will be your time to collaborate with your teams, to give and get feedback from other people in the studio, It's also the opportunity to work and to collaborate with the instructors. So we'll get a lot of time where I'll spend a half an hour with every team, helping them develop their deliverables, to think about their perspectives, to answer informed questions about their own work. But ultimately, this is your work. It's not like, here's an exercise, do this exercise, get a grade, right? It's about actually doing design. One of my mentors and close colleagues, Matt Conway, is a senior manager at Google now. He talked about this in a great article, which is like the difference between doing homework and design, is that homework is doing things in a checkbox, like, well, I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this, and you ask, like, well, why did you do that? And it's like, well, because that was what the assignment was. Versus doing design is I did this and this and this, and why did you do that? And it's like, well, I learned this from this first activity, and that led me to doing this next activity. Even if I'm the person telling you to do that, you should walk away from a studio knowing intrinsically the value of each of those activities and how they all fit together. And that's part of the studio experience. And then the last place is that, the studio itself is, I hate to say this term, but it is a form of crucible, right? It is a place where you can put unalloyed things to harden them. And so as a way, what ends up happening is that you work here so much, you put so much energy and effort into it, but what there is that you have a shared sense of responsibility to each other, and you have such an unparalleled opportunity to work so closely with other super brilliant people, which you all are. So that's the piece. That's why I love studios. It's not a place where you go, it's a place where you are for the entire year that you're here. Okay, any questions? All right.
So does that mean basically except for any electives we're taking, class time, work time is here?
No, it's unfair to say that. Yes, that is the case, that this is your space, but the entire university is open to you, right? If you need a quiet head down space to go do your reading for WIST, the law library is right across the street, right? Suzzalo Library is not too far away. There's lots of resources. I mean, the one thing is the makerspace is a huge hike across campus, but at least the campus is really nice. So if you have to go down there to do something, we have a vinyl cutter in the studio because that's the easiest thing to cut things up with. But if you need the laser cutter, it's not too far away. But yes, the classroom and work time is mostly done here. Mostly done here. In all of our 1950s glory. Yeah.
How much time do you usually spend here?
How much time do people spend here in the studio a week? My guess is at the lower end, it's 30 hours. At the upper end, it can be as many as 50. It really depends on what your class load is, right? So if you notice, like we have, like your typical load is 12 to 15 credits in a given quarter. I think 12 is typical, 10 is minimum, but 12 is pretty typical. So that would mean that for every hour that you're in class, you're spending 3 outside of class working. And so, but some people work at libraries and are flexible, but at the very least, the actual class time is 8 hours in the studio. That's the minimum. But I would say, like, there are lots of times where I come up in here on Sunday and people are working. I work in the studio some days, but I try to stay out of your space as much as I can. All right. And then the one last component of our curriculum, and we talked about this a little bit in the context of electives, is to recognize that we are not a department in and of itself, right? All of our faculty, all of our instruction, everything comes from other academic units on campus. And our agreement is with these 4 departments. So the Paul G. Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering, of course, the Information School, my alma mater, then Human-Centered Design and Engineering, and then finally the School of Art History and Design, which is where my faculty position is. So in any given quarter, you can expect to see faculty from these departments in your classes. So for instance, Prototyping Studio, John Freilich will be co-teaching that class with me next year. He and I will be together. He taught it last year. I'm coming in to assist him this year. The Ideation Studio will be taught by Audrey Desjardins from the School of Art, who works a lot in autobiographical design, autoethnography, and research through design. So we'll get a very strong interaction design voice from an academic perspective paired with my industry perspective as well. Then in the spring quarter, our research studio will be myself and Daniela Rosner from HCDE. So we can see like there's a lot of opportunity across the board for interactions with different kinds of faculty and different perspectives on the same problem space. And the characteristics of joining this from all 4 of these different groups is super important to us, right? And I mentioned that Andy Coe will be teaching the WIST class again, so you'll see him later today. So that's the core of like what we're all about, what we're doing. Studio practice, 1-year intensive, lots of opportunities to grow and specialize, and like interdisciplinary perspective. And I'll come in and I will mount a justification for why all of this is in just a second. But before we do that, we should do round 2 of introductions. So why is our program structured the way it is? So as I mentioned before, right, I believe that understanding theory will put you on a stronger track for your career, right? It is beyond craft and production, but by having deep understanding, you can be flexible in all sorts of different ways. You can bring to bear a lot of different ideas, and understanding that theory will put you on a better career track in the future. The studio practice, as I mentioned, right, applies theory constructively and develops industry relevant skills, right? So not only are you going to learn how to operate in a design organization while you're here, but it allows you to take that theoretical underpinning and understanding and apply it directly to craft. So it's not enough to just be like, well, here's why we do things. We'll actually then translate that into here's how you do things from that particular theoretical lens, right? Another piece of this is that feedback is not only, it is such a critical tool in so many different ways. From a pedagogical perspective, right, as an educator, right, we know that feedback is the most important thing you can do, right? So why don't we structure our class time in order to best provide that? Not only from your instructors, which have a number of years of experience and understanding of these problem areas, but from each other, right? We just walked around the room. How many different perspectives do you have? How many people have relevant experience and can help you better shape your projects and understanding of different ideas? So with that, then also it helps you develop a point of view. One of the things that distinguishes designers in these spaces is having a point of view and knowing how and why to defend it and argue for it. It's a skill that most people talk about and what they really want. And so by interacting so deeply with other people in our studio space, you develop that point of view over time. And then the last little bit of philosophy that I have is that the interdisciplinary nature of the education in HCID distinguishes our graduates. Again and again, I hear from industry professionals, which is like, this is a new program, I haven't heard much about it. And then they meet our students, they see them work, they see the outcome. Capstone presentations last year, I had at least a half a dozen people from industry and senior management positions come up to me and be like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? How are you getting this kind of quality, intensity, and output after just 11 months? And it's not just us, right? It is the nature of being here, being put together by the assembled faculty and by the nature and construction of the program itself. It's a theme that I hear again and again. And so as a result, what happens is the degree that you get here, and less than that, most importantly, the actual skills and competencies that you develop as a result of learning here puts you in a different league than other graduates, right? So I think that that's probably the strongest argument for why you should study in HCID. The last little piece of this, and I'm going to blaze through this so I can bring the faculty in before we take a break, is like why UW and Seattle? That's a big part of our program. It's actually super important for us to consider. You can study HE in a lot of different places. Those of you from California, you could study at Irvine, right? You could study at UC San Diego. You could study, right, like if you're on the East Coast, Carnegie Mellon and Georgia Tech are both clear and obvious places you want to study. But what differentiates us in particular is our location, right? So the University of Washington is probably the global leader for HCI research and practice. I think this year, and I'm going to quote a number that I shouldn't quote, but I think we are 16%, 1/6 of all of accepted Chi submissions this year. So like we are doing more academic research in HCI than any other university in the world. So like we are on the cutting edge. Then in combination with that, not only do we have this incredible environment and our interdisciplinary nature, but Seattle is one of the best places to prepare for a career in UX. So even if you don't want to move here, if you don't want to live here full time, and a lot of our students don't, right? Like 45% of our students moved to the Bay last year, I think. Maybe even more than that. This is the #2 campus for all of these companies, if not #1. Amazon and Microsoft, based in Seattle. If you're interested on the cutting edge and forefront of technology, Amazon and Microsoft are right here. Facebook's second largest campus, here in Seattle. Their second largest design team, here in Seattle, right? And Google, continuously growing. Major parts of Google's infrastructure is throughout multiple campuses in the Seattle area, Kirkland and Seattle. We have lots of opportunities to meet and intersect with practitioners of all levels in these areas, including HCID graduates who have gone to work for all of these companies. So there's lots of opportunities if you're interested in these kind of landship, the FANG companies, right? We're also, though, home to so many other different kinds of companies as well, each doing UX in different ways. Starbucks and Adobe, Starbucks downtown, the home of Starbucks, who doesn't love coffee, plus their digital efforts. Huge amount of work being done in those areas, right? Lots of opportunities around kind of the operating at the scale that Starbucks does. Very interesting design challenges. Adobe, a huge office based right next door to Google and Tableau in Fremont, right down the road from us. A 10-minute bike ride from here. But in addition, Expedia, Salesforce, REI in the retail space, especially looking at experience design and service design, and REI is very important. Plus, a lot of the big streaming companies are here. Hulu and HBO, both, I think, are they in the same building? You used to work at HBO, don't they? Yeah, it's basically but they're also, I think, both in the same building here in Seattle as well. A lot of the different streaming companies, and we're also the home of virtual reality. HTC, Oculus, HoloLens, and Samsung, all major VR and AR design offices here in the Seattle area. So there's a lot of different things going on in this space. You have so many opportunities to meet with different people working in different areas. We're also likely probably the home of conversational UIs, right? The Alexa team here, based here. Lots of work happening in these areas. If you're interested in thinking about design in different spaces, I think we're kind of unparalleled in a lot of ways. Not only that, we also have a ton of professional organizations to help you support and make those connections, right? So MHCID, of course, Puget Sound MHCID is a very robust organization that regularly partners with all of the different ones. IXDA, student and at the broader level, is also big here. UX Professionals Association and the AIGA, also very common. Plus we have a very robust, very active program in Women in UX. So XXUX is really big and also has stunning mentorship programs for women looking for user experience careers. So there's a lot to offer here. And then my last final pitch about Seattle is that we are the home of the Interaction Week 19 conference. So next year, Design in the Wild, February 4th through the 10th, the Interaction Week conference will be based in Seattle. So if you want to go to the best interaction design conference, you won't even have to travel. You'll be able to take the light rail. And also, I'm on the planning committee for it, so we'll also know and be able to find ways to intersect in a lot of different ways for you to participate, volunteering, and active in the design challenges and the education summit as well. So there's a lot going on in Seattle.